begin. Hello, Marcus of the Shadows. I'm gonna just start calling everyone who is hiding in the corner of the shadows. I mean, we could go cornier if you want. Zaire of the corny shadows. I mean, corn's pretty good. On the cob, off the cob. Okay, so no one else is hiding, right? Everyone's here. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. I mean, there are just a couple of you, and I mean, you know, you're slowly making your way out of the shadows, out of the shadow region of the user list, which sometimes doesn't work properly. Okay. Oops, that's the wrong background. That one? No, that's not the right one either. How about this one? Okay. So last time we talked about conditional statements. So last week we introduced them, also known as like if statements. So we talked about how you could have a condition. That condition could be true or false, and you could make some lines of code execute if that condition was true, or you could make something else execute if something is false. And so today we're going to talk about another. I will turn the music down. Is that better? Is that a good level? Where are you? The Shadow Realm or what? Okay, cool. So how do people feel about conditional statements that we talked about last week? You don't see me? Me or other people? Other people see me, right? So do people feel like they basically get the gist of how to use the if statements? So I don't know, Zaire, maybe you need to refresh or something. Okay, cool. That's good to hear. People get it. I think people don't normally have too much trouble with this. It's just sometimes people have like weirdness with like using else. So today we're going to talk about another application. So, and this is not something, this is just something I made up as a way to talk about it. Let me clear this. So if you think about like we're going to talk about a concept called a game state, and this is like something that is sometimes used in talking about something called state machines. We're going to talk about it as a way of learning like an application for conditionals. So what I'm going to do right now is let's think about like a really simple digital game. And think about like how that game is broken up into different states. So if you can think about like maybe a really simple like maybe 70s arcade game or something, maybe like Pac-Man. Let's think about Pac-Man because I think everyone's familiar with Pac-Man. So let's say you have like a Pac-Man arcade machine. What is the first thing that you see when you turn on the arcade machine? And I'm gonna need people to type in the chat. Otherwise, it's gonna be a long day. Yes? So ideally, in response to my questions, so Marcus said, right, that's Marcus? Okay, cool. Intro screen, title screen. Linda also said intro screen. So we can think about that as like an initial game state. So I'm just going to create this here. So we could talk about this as an intro or title. So I'm just going to write intro here. And so hopefully everyone can see that. I'm trying out, I can't remember, did I use this last time where I used this drawing tool? It's kind of weird, so I'm not entirely sure. Everyone can see it okay? Okay, cool. All right, so then let's say that you have the intro, and then ignoring the coin aspect, like, what is the next thing after, let's say you put coins in, then what happens in the game? Where does it transition from? It transitions from intro to what? What is the next part of the game? So title screen where you select stuff. So let's just imagine that this is the intro and title are the same. It's like a very simple game. So like once you're done with the intro, the title, let's say it's a very simple game, there are no options or anything, then where does that transition into? So I'm trying to think about the next state. So the title of modes to play. So let's say there's one mode, so you don't have to select anything. The simplest game possible. So like, let's skip that. Let's go from intro. Let's pretend like there are no other options. Then what's the next step? We're trying to make the simplest game possible. And it's kind of like hard to imagine because like games today are so complicated. But if you think about like really old digital games, they're much simpler, right? Did I just give it to you? Set the stage. So I'm saying there are no options. So like, let's say they're, okay, level 1, okay, cool. So let's just say this is level 1, right? So it goes from intro to level 1, there are no options. And so you go in here, and then let's say that, where are the possible things that can change the state from level 1? Where can level 1 go to potentially? Is it Libra Day? I'm a Libra. So the question was, where are the possible places that the game can go to from level 1? What can happen, like, where would the game transition to after level 1? What are the possible outcomes? So we don't have any options, right? So there's no level select. So title screen or level 2. So we can, so like, why the title screen? And then fail state, so that's a good one. So like if you lose, for instance, then you'll probably like, maybe there's a screen that shows that you've failed, right? That and then you restart to the beginning maybe. So we can think about that as like one potential outcome for this. So I can think about going from level 1 to fail. So if the player loses, then they get sent to the fail screen, and then from fail, they get sent back to the intro screen. So they have to start the game over, right? And then the other alternative was level 2, right? So instead of saying level 2 and level 3 and level 4, we're just going to say no, let's just say level 2. We're just going to keep it simple. We'll say there are 2 levels in this game. So where can you go from level 2? Let's say there's only level 1 and level 2. Level 2 is the final level. So where do you go from level 2 potentially? So Barshar said the end. So what do you mean by the end? We're playing a hypothetical, very simple game. So I was just imagining Pac-Man or something like on that level. So TJ said you start over. So like you could potentially fail again, like the player could lose. So they could be sent to the fail state from level 1 or level 2. But let's say that they win. Where might they go from there? So you might call it an end state. I'm just going to call it a win state. Or like, because game over often has a negative connotation to it. I mean, it's a little early for the itis. You gotta save that for dinner. Okay, so let's say that this is where the player has won, right? They have defeated the final boss of level 2. And then where does it go from there? So like after the player has won, you know, they see the end game story or cinematic or whatever. And then what happens to the game? Starting to get a feel for how most of your days go, Zaire. So someone's in credits, so that's certainly something that's possible, right? So we could say credits. So, right. Sorry, I'm writing this with my mouse, so it's not the cleanest. And then New Game Plus. So this is before New Game Plus was a thing. But we can expect that like after the credits roll, it goes back to the main menu, right? Or the intro. And so what we have here is this is a flowchart, right? And so you can think about these as different states of the game. So the game can exist in an intro state, it can exist in a level 1 state, it can exist in a level 2 state, it can go to a fail state from either level 1 or level 2. If it goes to the fail state, that's followed by basically the game resetting back to the introduction. If you get past level 1, then you go to level 2, and if you defeat the second level, if you beat the second level, then you go to win, the win state, so that's, you know, congratulations, etc. And then it goes to the credits roll, and then it sends you back to the very beginning, the introduction. So the game restarts for the next person to play, or if you want to play again. So does that make sense, like how this progression works? Let's say like so like normally when I'm in class, I have like this thing where I ask people to like have their hand up and give me like 1 to 5 fingers as a way of indicating how much they get something. So like I would ask them just to put up 5 fingers for like they understand perfectly, they totally get it, and like put up 1 finger for like I don't know where I am, I don't understand this, who are you? If you can just throw in the chat like how much you understand this game state that I've set up, this different system here. If you can just give like a number, like 1 to 5, 5 being I understand perfectly, 1 being I don't understand at all, in the chat so I can get a feel for how people are understanding this. I want to make sure that no one's feeling lost. So we got a 3, a 5, a 5, a 2, a 3, a 3. Okay, so maybe let's go over another one more time. So we're talking about a very, very simple, and a 1. We're talking about a very, very simple game. Thinking back to like the simplest possible game we can make. And so we're coming up with a way of conceptualizing the different states that the game might be in. So you can think about this almost as if like the screens that you'll see in the game as a player. So when you turn the game on, the very first one is the introduction. So since this is like before the game, we can think about this like, I'm gonna give this a label. So I'm just gonna give it a label of 0. So it's just like a code for it, because it's before the game begins. And then we might have level 1. So once you like press a button, from the introduction, the simplest thing I can do is go to the first level. So I'm gonna give that a code of 1. And then if you defeat level 1, then you get sent to level 2. So I'm gonna code that as 2. And then you could do 2 things from there, right? So like, let's say that you win the game. So you defeat, or you beat level 2, you defeat the enemies or whatever on level 2, then you get sent to the win screen. So I'm just gonna call this one 3. And then after the win screen plays, then you can be sent to the credits. So I'm gonna call this one 4. And then once the credits are done, you get sent back to the title screen or introduction. And so the alternative to winning is losing, right? So like, let's say you got through the introduction, you're on level 1 and you lose as a player. So instead of being sent to level 2, you're sent to the fail screen, the you lose screen. So I can call this one, I'm gonna call this one -1 because it's, and this is kind of arbitrary, I'm just giving it a code. So because it's like you're way off base. So that fail screen is -1. And then after the fail screen, let's say you press another button and you get sent back to the introduction or title screen. And so this represents like a way of understanding the game and like all the states that are a part of it. If state is confusing, think about it as screen, the different screens that you might see while you're playing the game. And we're trying to make it as simplified a game as possible because we're actually going to code it. So we want to make sure that it's not too confusing. So does that make sense? Do people feel better about it now than before? People ready to move on? Okay, cool. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and open up processing. And so we can think about this example. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do void setup and void draw. I'm gonna move this over here. And so, you know, every sketch I make is gonna have those first, and then everything needs a size, right? So maybe I'll make it like 1200 by 800. Maybe, let's see. So it gives me a window about this big, which is fine by me. I could make it bigger, but it's fine. So when we're thinking about, like, if I go back here, we're thinking about like keeping track of some value that might change. And so that value, we're representing it with a whole number here. And so how can we represent a whole number in processing? What variable type, what data type do we use for whole numbers? We've talked about like several different kinds, right? We've talked about integers, floats, we've talked about booleans, we've talked about strings. So int. So int is used for whole numbers, int stands for integer. So I'm gonna create a new integer. I'm gonna call it game state. And so we're gonna use this variable to keep track of what state our game is in. And so I'm gonna give it an initial value inside of setup. So based on what we've done here, what should the initial value of game state be? What is the initial game state? Based on the coding, the black part that we did, where should the game start? Yeah, 0, because it's the introduction, right? And so I'm gonna write game state equals 0, semicolon. And so now we can start to think about like how we can break up our draw loop into different areas of code for each state of the game. So I can use an if statement. So if, and then the condition goes inside the parentheses. So in this case, I want to be able to check if game state is equal to 0. So I'm going to write game state. And when I want to check, if I want to do a comparison, I want to ask if this variable has this value, if it's the same. I use 2 equal marks, right? So that is saying compare the thing on the left to the thing on the right. So let's say it's 0. If these are the same, then execute the code inside of the curly brackets if this is true. If it's false, then move on. Don't execute the code in the curly brackets. So let's say that in game state 0, I want to set let's say that there should probably be a background color. So what color should we use? What's a good like neutral color? Can't type. So 255 so like 255 and blue. So we can do 255 for the blue. So like we have the red, the green, and the blue value, right? For a color, for a RGB color. So I'm just gonna do like, I don't know, 75, 80, 90, and 255. So that's a combination of what everyone said. So if I run this, I can see that it starts off with this blue color because it's checking if game state is equal to 0, and it is, since we started that initial value at 0, and so it sets the background color to blue. So the red value, the green value, and the blue value. And so we can also set up other states. So I'm just going to add a comment here, intro or title state. So we know that we've coded 0 to mean the intro or title. So I might want to use some text. So has anyone used text before in this class? So we're going to talk about like a lot of little things that we may not have talked about in previous classes. I'm really hoping that people are experimenting and trying new things in processing every week, so that you can start to expand your repertoire of different things you can do with processing, because we don't have time to cover everything. And the number one thing that is like a predictor of being a good developer is being resourceful and being able to expand your skill set, and being able to solve problems on your own. So if you want to write text, you write the word text and then open parentheses, and then it's a string, because you're trying to display text as itself, not code. So when we use strings, we use quotation marks to indicate that it's a string. So I'm just going to write an introductory message. So what's a good introductory message, or what maybe the title of the game? So what is our game called? Give me a name that's moderately appropriate. Okay, so we got level up, boot, super, Juno, Sissiters. Great name. And then text takes the X and the Y position. Maybe I'll make this like slash LOL. So if we want to put this in the middle, yep, it's too late. It's Sissiters now. So let's put this in the middle. So how do we put something in the middle of the x-axis? Gosh, I'm getting hot in here. Might have to turn on the AC. So how do we put something in the middle of the x-axis? So like, what is the thing we have that is built into processing that will give us the width of our window? You remember what that is? What the built-in variable? So you got it. Width is the built-in variable that will give us the width of the window. And if we divide it by 2, that's half of the width. And then if we want to put it in the middle on the y-axis, we can use height divided by 2. And again, you can tell that these are built-in variables because the way they change color here. And so like, regardless of what we set this to, this is always going to be the same as these values. And so I'm gonna see what this looks like. And you can see that it's very, very small. So if I want to make it larger, I can use what's called text size. and you can indicate what size font you want to use. So let's say I want to use size 24. So let's see if that's better. It's a little bit better, maybe even bigger, maybe like 32. So now it's off screen. So like I said to put it in the middle. So why do you think it's drawing it on the right side rather than all centered? Does anyone know why that would happen? Why would it format text like this? Like let's say you're working in like a word processor, like Word or something, then why would it start your text from there? What if you want to be in the center? What would you have to change? So the size, so we changed the size, right? We made it bigger, but regardless of how big we make it, it's drawing it to the right of the position we gave it. So change where the line starts. So I could change where the line starts, right? So I could start it from the left if I wanted to, but if I wanted to be centered, you might have to change what's called the alignment. So there's text alignment. So like, you know how like you can make it start the line from the left, you can start it in the center or the right. So that's the alignment. So does that sound familiar to people? So I can use something called text align, which will set the alignment. And if you want to indicate it, it's like in all caps, so it's center. And if you're like, I don't know how this works, don't forget that you can always like right click on something, find in reference, and it will open up the reference page. Like I said, the reference page is the textbook for this class. So you should be familiar with the textbook because it's where all the answers are for how to use code in processing. And it's built in. So all you have to do is right click, find in reference, and then it will pull it up, right? It will pull up examples of how you use this. It will tell you exactly what it is. It will give you links to other things. There are also examples on here. If you go back to the main page, you can find examples. So I can see that like it takes the parameters left, right, or center. And so I want it to be centered, so I'm just saying center. So if I run this, I can see that it's centered now, so that's good. And so when we look back at our flowchart, we're thinking about like what the next potential state is. So like, where is the next state that we might move to from 0? So there's only one place it can go, right? This arrow leading into level 1. And so what I'm gonna do is, let me turn off, I have this preview on the side of my screen and I don't like it. You know, it's like when you're in like a video chat and then you see your picture and all you want to do is look at your picture because you're like, do I look okay? Okay, so we can think about, here we're checking if the game state has a value of 0. If it is, do the introduction screen stuff, do the title screen stuff. But if it's not, then it skips down to here. And so we can use else. And then I can use another if statement, so if. So what will happen is, if the game state is not equal to 0, if it's equal to anything but 0, it will skip down to this else, and then it will ask if another condition is true. That the next condition is for the next state, so I can write game state equals 1. And this corresponds to level 1 state. And so let's say that we have a different background color for level 1. So I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna give it like, I don't know, maybe like black, so that's 0. Remember, if you wanna indicate a color, that is a grayscale color, all you have to do is use one color, because it's basically like if you use black, it's 0, 0, 0, 0 for the red, 0 for the green, 0 for the blue. If you use white, it's 255 for red, green, and blue, so it's 255, 255, 255. So if you do it this way, it's like it knows what you're talking about. It knows you mean a grayscale, a black and white color. Okay, so now we have potentially something for level 1. And so does the game, at this point, does the game change from level, or game state 0, which is the intro screen, to game state 1? Is there any way for it to change or transition into that new game state? Or is it just stuck? I mean, it's just stuck, right? It's not gonna change. Nothing's happening. I can't play the game. And so like you might want to think about like what might be a way to, like, let's say you're in the arcade and like it's a very, very simple minimal game. What might you have to do in order to start the game? Let's say you put coins in already. What do you have to do? So it is stuck, right? So maybe press a key or something, press a button. And so, does anyone use key pressed yet? So we're inside of game state 0, right? So everything inside of here is on the title screen. So when we're on the title screen, we can also check if something is happening. So I can check if, and we can use what's called key pressed. What key press does is it will execute this code if this is true. So this will be true when someone's pressing a key. If they're not pressing a key, then it will be false. So in this case, we want to, what do we need to do to game state to make it into the state for level 1? So when the key is pressed, we want to advance the game. And so what do we need to modify game state to be in the level 1 state? What do we need to do to it? So we're at the point where we want to advance the game, right? The player has pressed some key. This is actually for any key. And so what do we need to change in order to make the game state enter the next state? So if we look back here, what value do we associate with level 1? What do we see here? So this is our game state value, right? So it's 0 at the intro, right? So when we press the key, we want to begin the game. So it should change from 0 to what? Just tell me what this number is. What is this number? This number right here. The tall one, yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So 1. So we need it to change from 0 to 1. And so if we want to assign it that value, we write game state equals 1. And so now the next time this game runs, because remember, draw is a loop, right? So it'll, once it gets to the bottom, it'll start over, and then it'll ask if game state is equal to 0, but it won't be. It'll be equal to 1. So like once this is false, it will skip down to here, and it'll ask if the game state is equal to 1, which it is. And so it'll run this code here for level 1. So if I press the key, now it's advancing to level 1. Of course, we can't do anything at this point. And so we can think about, like, let's just build out the structure of this first. So let's say we want to build in the next game state. So what is the game state for level 2? Do you remember? Which one is for level 2? Two, right? Gosh, I've already... You don't like this music? So else if game state is equal to 2. And so when the game state is equal to 2, this will be the level 2 state. So I'm not going to be able to please everyone, unfortunately, with the music. I would do a poll, but I feel like it doesn't work very well on Twitch. Do people like the music, like other people? Or is it distracting? Would you rather not have any music? What's the idea? Because I don't have to include the music on the actual thing. I can just play it for myself. So if anyone wants to take initiative on creating a Spotify playlist of things and adding stuff, you can. I'm gonna have to listen to it too, so if it distracts me, I might have to turn it off. So when I listen to this stuff, it helps me like focus and stay calm and feel relaxed. So that's why I play it. But yeah, if someone wants to take initiative, create a Spotify playlist and share it with the class, you can share it on River, and then everyone can add stuff, and then I can play that. I'm happy to try that. Okay, so we have essentially a level 1 state and a level 2 state. And so we can also think about the other states that we involved. So when we drew our diagram, we also had states for fail, which was -1. We also had the win screen, which was 3, and the credits, which was 4. So if I go back, I can go ahead and like build out that structure. So game state equals -1. So this is the lose state, else if game state is equal to 3. That's the win state. And then the final one, else if game state equals 4. Credits. So we have here a way of breaking up our code into these little segments, right? So each segment for each game state corresponds to the code that should be executed when that state is active. So again, 0 is for the intro or title screen. So all the code we want to happen in the intro or title screen is going between the curly brackets here. So in order to advance to game state 1, which is level 1, we need to do something in here that modifies that state. So if it stays the same, if game state stays 0 the whole time, it's just going to stay on the intro or title screen. So if we have the game here, we need, what were the possible states that are linked to level 1 or state 1? So state 1 can go to 2 different places. What are those places? So for this semester, next Monday is a holiday, and then next Tuesday is a Monday schedule. But where do we go from state 1, which is level 1? What are the 2 possible states? Where do the arrows lead from state 1? So David said -1 or 2. So -1 is the fail. So cool, everyone got it. So either -1 or 2. And so we need to do something when when the player fails. So let's say that, let's try to think of, we have to think of actually what the game is maybe. So I'm just gonna start creating something. So let's say that we have like a circle moving across the screen, and if the circle gets past or like off the screen, then you fail the game. So if I want to do that, I need to create some variables. So I'm gonna create like a circle X to keep track of an X position. What you can do is you can also, so like I could create a second integer called circle Y here. So this is like how we've done it so far. But if you want to actually make this simpler and easier to write, you can actually get rid of this. If there are two variables of the same type and you want to declare them at the same time, you can use a comma. So in this case, it will declare a new integer called circle X and a separate new integer called circle Y. So that can like save you some time. I can also create one for circle diameter. I'm just calling it circle dia. Dia stands for diameter. And I can give these initial values inside of my setup. So I can write circle X equals, so I'm just going to start it on the left side of the screen. So I can say equals 0, and then circle Y. If I want to put it in the middle of the y-axis, what do I need to write to put it in the middle of the y-axis? Remember, we put this text in the middle of the y-axis, so how would we do it here? We can use height divided by 2, right? So that's, the height is all the way at the bottom, so if you do half of that, if you divide by 2, it's the middle. And then I can write circle dia for diameter. And so maybe I'll make this like 100 pixels in diameter. And so for our game, let's say that we want to display this. So if I want to draw a circle, I use ellipse. And then I can use circle X for the X position, circle Y for the Y position, circle dia for the width, and circle dia for the height. So I'm using circle dia for both because its ellipse can be either like an oval or a circle. So if it's the same width and height, then it becomes a circle. So that's why it's the diameter. And so if I run this, let's see, you can see it's just right here on the left. So if I want to move it, if I want it to move to the right, what do I need to modify to make the circle move to the right? Like this is the x-axis, right? Left and right. So what needs to happen to what variable in order for it to move to the right? Oh, I'm gonna have to turn on the AC. Like hot here. So which variable do we have to modify in which way? So we have 3 different variables here, right? So which one will allow us to make it automatically move to the right? So which one indicates where it is on the x-axis? Is it circle X, circle Y, or circle dia for the x-axis? So the X is the one that goes left to right, and then the Y is the one that goes up to down. So it's not circle Y, because that one's how high it is, right? The circle X. So if I want this to move, I can write circle X equals circle X plus 1. So this will take the value of circle X and it will add 1. So it'll start off at 0, and then it will be 0 plus 1, so it'll be 1. And then 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, etc. So if I run this, you can see that it starts moving, right? So it's moving to the right. There's actually a shorter way of writing this. If I wanted to like make this even simpler, there are 2 different ways I could write this. I could write, instead of this very long thing right now, I can do plus equals 1. So this is a shorthand for saying take this value, whatever it is, and then add this value. So it'll take whatever circle x is and add 1. It's the same as circle x equals circle x plus 1. It's just a simpler way of writing it. Another way of writing it is you could write circle x plus plus. Circle x plus plus will just add 1 to circle x. So that's just another way of writing it. So if I wanted to move faster, what do I need to change in order for it to move faster? Because 1 is 1 pixel per frame, because this will execute this line of code once, whenever it's in game state 1, once per frame. So if I wanted to go at a greater distance each frame, so I could change it to 2, yes, and that will be twice as fast. So I could change it to like 5, that would be even faster. And so it's moving across the screen. And so how can we use a conditional statement to be able to tell if the circle has gone off the right side of the screen? How can we tell if it's gone off screen? We need to check something, right? So we have to check the right side. So the left to the right axis is the x-axis, right? So I can check if circle x is greater than a certain amount. Greater than in this case would mean to the right of a position. So let's say that, what is the rightmost part of the window? The leftmost part is 0. And then like when your window is drawn, it's drawn 1200 pixels out from 0. So that's 1200 pixels wide. So what is the built-in variable that we use to get the width of the window, which is all the way to the right? What is it called? What is the built-in variable to get the width, which is the right side of the window? What is it called? What do we use to get that value? Thank you, width. Okay. So in this case, so circle x is increasing by 5 each frame that we're in level 1. And so if it goes beyond the width, then let's say that should be the lose state. So which game state value is the lose state? Is it 2? Is it -1? Is it 3? Or is it 4? Which one says lose state on the right? I'm asking like super easy questions. I mean, are they like too easy? Is that the problem? So -1, right? So we know that -1 it corresponds to the lose state. So if it goes beyond the screen, let's say that game state equals -1. So then we know that the player has lost, and then this code will execute. So just as a visual indicator that you have lost, let's say I want to draw like a red background on here. So I can do like 255, 80, 80. So that's a red color so that I can see. I hope your brain's okay. Your special oatmeal probably. So I press a key to transition from game state 0 to game state 1. Our circle is moving across the screen. And then when it gets to the end of the screen, it transitions into our lose state, which we know is a red color. And so if we can also think about like a win state, right? So we need to transition. If we look back at our states here, we need to not only be able to transition to -1, but we also need to transition to 2, which is level 2. And so to do that, we need to have a way for the player to beat level 1. So we can think about like what that might be. So you can think about like we talked about distance a little bit on Monday. So using the dist function. So I can create like something to keep track of distance. So let's say I want to have it where if the player clicks on the circle before it gets to the right, then they advance to level 2. So what I can do to get that is I can create like a temporary variable here called distance. I'm just going to call it distance. So this is going to be used for the distance between the cursor. So I can say equals dist. So dist takes 2 different points in space. It takes an x and a y for 1 point and an x and a y for a second point, and then it measures the distance. So if I want to check the distance from my cursor, I can use mouse X and mouse Y for the X and Y position of my cursor. And then for our circle, we already have circle X and circle Y. And so what this will do is it will give us this, give us the distance. So it'll basically like take a tape measure between the cursor and wherever the circle's center position is. And so in our if statement, the dist with the T, short for distance. So we can check if our distance is less than a certain amount. So like if we think about like, let's say, maybe I should just, I wish I could like clear this somehow. Can I like cut this or something? Are people going to be able to remember how this works, how this is structured? Because I might end up drawing over it. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and clear it if no one protests. No protest. Okay. So let's say that here, let's say this is our circle, right? And we have the center is circle X and circle Y. And then we have our cursor. And so what dist will do, since we gave it 2 points, right? We gave it our mouse X and mouse Y. So this is mouse X. It's really slow to like draw words on here. And then this one is circle. Can you all see this? My head's not in the way. Circle X and circle Y, right? So those are the 2 points. And so what dist will do is it will measure the distance between those 2 points in space. And so we know that if that, so like, let's say this is like, I don't know, 5 inches maybe. It's in pixels, so let's say 500 pixels. We know that if that distance is less than this amount, then the cursor is going to be hovering over that circle. Because if the distance is greater than that, it means it's like right outside of it. And so what do we call this distance between the center of a circle and the outside? What is this called in like geometry? Does anyone remember that? Half of the radius, right? So the radius is half of the diameter. So this is the radius. And so we already know what the diameter is, right, of our circle. So like, you can think about that as, this is, I called it circle, sorry for my awful handwriting, circle dia, which is the diameter. So we know that if we divide the circle diameter in half, we'll get the radius. So if the distance between the cursor and the center of our circle is less than the radius, we know that the cursor is on top of it. So like, you know, if it's like here, for instance, we know that this distance is less than the radius, and so we know that it's hovering over the circle. Hope that makes sense. So we're checking if that distance is less than circle dia, which is our diameter, divided by 2 is the radius. That's half of the diameter. And so if it is, we want to say that that's a winning condition. And so we want to advance to level 2. So which one is level 2? Which game state takes us to level 2? Right? And so let's try it. And this is actually giving us, this is actually an error. So you see where it's underlined here? And it's saying that basically this is giving us a float, and I call this an int. So in a lot of times, floats and integers are interchangeable. So I'm just going to write float instead of int. So it will go away. In this case, it doesn't really matter because it's going to be a whole number, but it makes the error go away. So I'm going to start the game. If I go here, it's actually advanced to the level 2 state, but nothing's happening in it, so we don't see anything. So if I want to, let's say, I'm going to set a background color of 255. So that's like a white background. So like when we're in level 2, I can at least see that we're in that state. So then we can have whatever we want to happen in this state for level 2. So like, you know, whatever. And then from there, we can have a win condition and a lose condition from there, since we know that from level 2, we can go to like a fail screen or a win screen. And then from our win screen, we know that we'll eventually want to advance from the win screen to the credits. And so for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to like use the same rule set that we did for our, I'm going to like basically copy what we did in game state 1, which was level 1. And I want to do something similar. So I just copied and pasted it. Oops. And so if I just run this, let's just see what that looks like. And so it continues going on. We have to consider though, let's say that we want to move it backwards. So instead of adding one, we can modify circle X to be minus equals. So again, all I did was copy and paste this so that I can use that as like a template kind of. And then we were checking if it was greater than width. Let's say that we want to check if it's all the way to the left of the screen. What would we need to do to check if it was to the left? What is the leftmost part of the x-axis? So if width is the right side, what is the left side? So it's the x-axis, right? But like in terms of like the values as you go along it, it starts off at what? On the left? 0, right? So we know that if circle X is less than 0, then it's going to go off screen. So if I try to run this, let's see. So I can see that it started going the other way, and then when it went off the screen, it sent me to the lose state. One thing I need to think about here is when we advance here, instead of going to level 2, let's say that we want to go to the win state. So the win state we can see here is a value of 3. So let's try this. So I've lost. Let's see if I can win. And so this time it went to game state equals 3. It didn't clear the background at all because we didn't tell it to. So I can give a, let's see, background, and like maybe I'll use like a green color. So I'll use like something like this. So let's run that. So that time I caught it before it got off screen. And so it went to the green win state. And so we can, in each state, we're checking if the condition is met to advance the state. So when we were in game state 0, which is the title screen, we only had one option, right? It could only go to level 1. So we only needed one if statement to check if a condition was met. The condition to advance to level 1 is key pressed. So when we did key press, it made the game state equal to 1. And so this is all the stuff for level 1. So it cleared the background. It moved circle X to the right by increasing the value. We drew our actual circle using our variables that we created. We checked if it went beyond the right side of the screen. If it did, if it went past the width, which is the right side, then it gave us the loose state, which is -1. So it made game state equal to -1. And then we separately checked if the distance between our cursor's position and our circle's position, if it was less than the radius, we knew that it was hovering over the circle, right? And so if that's the case, we wanted to make game state equal to 2, because that represents level 2, the player should advance to level 2. And so we do all the level 2 stuff, which is the same thing as level 1, except instead of going to the right, when you decrease that X value, it goes to the left instead. So I'm going to write minus, because it's the same, like minus equals is like saying circle X equals circle X minus 5. You can also do like asterisk equals or divide equals, and they'll do the same thing for those other operators. And so we were checking if circle X was less than 0. 0 is the left side of the X-axis. So if it's gone beyond the left side, then we wanted to set it to the loose state. And then separately, we checked the distance between our cursor and the circle again for level 2, the same way as we did in level 1. And then if it was less than the radius, and again, if we look back at here, we know that if the distance between the cursor and the center of the circle, if it's less than this yellow line, this radius, we know that it's on top of it, it's within the bounds of it. So if the cursor was here, we know that that means it's hovering over it. So we can use it as a sort of a button in a way. Was anyone able to use dist for the homework from last week? The distance function? And you can say no if no. Okay. Does it make sense how this distance function is working here? Sorry, the dist function. I called our variable distance. So does this make sense on a scale of, let's say, for distance, a scale of 1 to 5. 5, I get it completely. 1, I don't get it at all. Can you just give the number in the chat? Does it make sense? We got 2 4s. 3, 3. So anytime you want to have, you want to basically check the distance. So where's my, I have a, I don't know where my tape measure went. I normally have a tape measure here. Here it is. So like you want to measure the distance between 2 points. Let's say I want to measure the distance between my right hand and my left hand. And so we have like some numbers on here, right? So like we have to give it the X and the Y position of my left hand, and we have to give it the X and the right position of my right hand, and then it will measure that distance. So in this case, we're checking against the cursor's position. Oh, is it? It's because it's like yellow. That's funny. It's yellow. So it's like, this is a green screen, and this is a little bit too close. I have like, do I have some other green stuff around here? See this? You see this? See through this? I could wear this. Huh? Yeah, is that a good look? You can like see through my head here. So yellow is very close to green, so that's why it does that. It's okay, I'm fine. I'm gonna live. So yeah, we're measuring the distance between the cursor, which is mouse X and mouse Y, the X position of the mouse and the Y position of the mouse, against the X position and the Y position of our circle, circle X and circle Y. I'm okay, I'm gonna be all right. And so if that distance that it gives us is less than the radius, so this is the radius, it's the diameter divided by 2, then game state should be 3 because we know that that's the winning state, right? So it's all right, folks. I'm gonna be okay. So do people see how this could be useful and practical for your games in order to break things up into these different states to organize your code, and how you can use conditional statements to make everything logical and flow? Hope so. So that's it for game state. So I haven't finished this, but the logic is all here in order to finish it out. We just happen to use more states than we had time for. I'm gonna post examples on River when I post the homework. So you're gonna be making a game using game states the same way that we did. And you're gonna be coming up with your own mechanics for how a player wins or loses a game. So in this example game, you know, you had to like hover over the cursor in order to advance to the next level. And so you're gonna have to come up with your own mechanics for several levels for a player to win or lose. So I'm gonna post it later today on River, but if you wanna get started, you can just do what we did together in class and start to think about like what your own mechanics might be. So yeah, I hope you're able to understand things. I hope it made sense. If not, you can always go back and watch again later. And if you have any questions after you rewatch it, I'm here to help you. There's also the tutor, so don't forget that we have Onyx, who is a tutor for this class. So he's getting paid to tutor. So there's the Discord server that he meets people to help them. And yeah, so that's it for today. So I will see you on Tuesday, not Monday. So yeah, I'm gonna post the link to this. I'm gonna put this on open processing. I'll post the link and everything later. And yeah, have a good day and weekend. It's not quite the weekend yet, but I'll see you next time.